looks at Truth Social, where everything, for the most part, is "you are fabulous," and so forth and so on. He has Natalie Harp, the aide who is often described as the human printer, who sits in a room with him in almost every meeting, almost every senior meeting. She is in more than basically any other major staffer. And she supplies him with a constant stream of positive news. But those positive news pieces are coming from Gateway Pundit or all kinds of other websites. He hears what he wants to hear. And when aides try to push back on him, as they did, and we write about this in the book for months, about you need to talk about affordability. You need to talk about what people are feeling. He doesn't want to hear it. And it is much easier for him to just close his ears and his inputs. So that is also how you end up with a situation where you can have Donahue fired. You see this across government because they are not getting a lot of feedback elsewhere.
Jonathan, when you talk about the difference between his first term and now, and we were talking earlier about race, we don't even have an Omarosa in the White House this time. I mean, in the first term, you did have Omarosa Manigault, who appeared to be reaching out to some in the black community, me and others, even those of us that had fought Trump on Central Park 5 or whatever. The fact that there's no black inside the White House at all that we can see visible, and then you compound that with how we were just talking about Joe and Mika in the earlier segment, about how Hegseth just takes blacks off the wall at the Pentagon, no matter what they've accomplished. Talk to me, and I've seen you refer to it in the book, about how this has been a blatantly kind of racially divisive administration, if not just outright racist.
I'm not sure it's that different from term one, to be honest with you, in that respect.
Well, I don't think it is, but the optics are different.
That's interesting. It's interesting to hear you say that, because from our... What do you think? I mean, I'm not sure it's that, in that respect, that different from term one.
I think that the output in terms of what they're doing is different to the extent that... I mean, I agree that I think that generally the sentiment is...
Jared not being so involved with
that's what it is. That's what
That's a good point,
about.
actually.
Yeah.
The outreach seems less as well.
Yeah.
But I don't think they had much more representation in the first term.
They did not. A little bit. I mean, but very minor. Harrison Fields was the only black staffer who I could think of and who was in the press office, and he left many, many months ago. But no, it was not... There was not huge representation, but there were people like Omarosa who did make some effort. Jared did have a lot of conversations with people on the Hill. Criminal justice reform. Yeah. He had a very good working relationship with Hakeem Jeffries, which was prior to Hakeem Jeffries being the leader. So in that respect, it is different. But I do think that it's funny because criminal justice reform, as you wrote before any of us when you were at Axios, it was one of Trump's signature pieces of legislation, and he hated it. And he did nothing but, complain about it for months and months and months. So what I would say is what you're seeing now is, and we talk about this in the book, how Steve Bannon would refer to pure Trump, and we're getting pure Trump now. We are getting pure Trump now.
And I just want to underscore, Maggie was talking about Natalie Harp earlier on, and I think she's an interesting figure to describe because she really evokes the atmosphere in there right now.
Right.
And we obtained in the reporting for this book, I mean, we published it in the New York Times quite some time ago, but we obtained letters that she had written for the president and left in some of his private spaces. And they were very unusual letters, very personal letters. And they said things like, "You are all that matters to me." And they were left in some of his private spaces. And during the campaign, the Secret Service was actually quite alarmed by some of these letters. But she is someone that feeds him good news, that is a channel of information to him. If people want to get something to him that's going to be unvetted, that won't go through the chief of staff, they go through her. So that's the environment that Maggie was describing. And there wasn't really...
No.
That didn't really exist in term one, did it?
No.
There was nothing like that, exactly.
No, there was no gatekeeper that way. And there also wasn't as much of, and I was thinking about this the other day in terms of the reporters calling Trump, which we've obviously talked about a lot, directly on his cell phone. Part of why people do that this time is because the press office will not get ahead of him on anything. And, this happened more often in term one, and you know this, where he would just contradict his aides or cut their legs. We're seeing that a lot this week, obviously, with the housing bill, for instance.
Right.
But we write about this episode last year in the book around the 12-day war in Iran, where when Trump saw the Pentagon sort of modifying one of his Truth Social posts about we control the skies over Iran, he was furious. And that was the last time that you saw any kind of contradiction of what he was saying. So if you are a reporter who needs an answer fast, I understand why people are inclined to then just call him. It doesn't mean that you're getting reliable information, something that, you know, isn't going to be contradicted 15 minutes later. But if you're a staffer, it creates this climate of fear. And the other piece, too, that I would just add to that is you had Elon Musk, and we get into this in great detail, essentially serving not as a co-president, but as a co-president for parts of the first 4 months or so. And that created so much destabilization of this government that I think they also never quite recovered. But that's for another time.
Well, the Silicon Valley dynamic, though, and speaking of personal correspondence, I want to read from page 358 briefly, because this is after Jeff Bezos' wedding in Venice. And Bezos is talking to Trump, and Trump marvels. He asks, "How was it? Everyone was at your wedding." "It was great," Bezos replied. When the conversation turned to the guest list and Bezos mentioned that the actress Sydney Sweeney had attended, the president's interest deepened. Quote, "Ooh, many O's," end quote, Trump said. And so just to get inside of how Silicon Valley is dealing with President Trump and their knowledge of how to work him, how much of this is strategic and how cynical is that strategy, I guess, Jonathan?
So we have a lot of reporting from the period after the election where Trump was sort of in his pleasure palace, you know, at Mar-a-Lago. Everyone was coming to visit him. He was on top of the world. And it was very interesting because those tech titans Trump saw them as enemies in term one. People forget, he published a coffee table book in 2024 in which he threatened to send Mark Zuckerberg to prison for the rest of his life if he interfered in the 2024 election. So they come back to him, and there was this routine where Trump would host them on the patio at Mar-a-Lago, and he sits there holding court. He's got his iPad playing DJ, and he would pipe through the sound system the Star Spangled Banner while they're sitting there at dinner. But it was not the normal version of Star Spangled Banner. It was the version recorded by the J6 prison choir, okay? And, of course, you're there, what are you going to do? So Zuckerberg stands up, hand on the chest, you know, he doesn't know what this thing is. But they stand there, and it's the version of the Star Spangled Banner recorded by people who were imprisoned for their role in the January 6th riot.
Wow.
So that happened. We also have in the book, Trump was at his golf club at Doral, and he's showing off, this is around Christmas time, 2024, he's showing off text messages that he's received from Bezos and Zuckerberg. And you know, Trump is basically gloating about how much they're, quote-unquote, kissing my ass. The Bezos one was a smiling selfie from him and Lauren Sanchez, thanks for dinner, etc. The Zuckerberg sent him a letter written by one of his children, which was talking about the golden age of America. And Trump showed it off to Musk at Mar-a-Lago, and Musk said, quote, direct quote, first-class groveling. So Musk was enjoying watching his rivals, you know, suck up to Trump. I'm not going to speculate about motivation. I don't think it takes a great genius to realize that Donald Trump is willing to use government power to help and to hurt people. So, you know, you don't really need to be a rocket scientist to figure out the motivations.
Literally, I guess. A literal rocket scientist.
Well, yeah.
Right. I mean, one of the things actually about the passage that you just read, what's striking about that scene is that it is Bezos coming into the Oval Office. Yes, they're discussing Sydney Sweeney and his wedding guests. But he's coming in to talk about a space contract specifically. There is a launch pad that he would like to see his company, Blue Origin, get. He doesn't explicitly say, don't give it to Elon Musk, who, you have to remember by then, this is July, and Elon Musk has been not quite banished, but banished from the Oval Office and the White House. And he suggests, Bezos, that Trump should tell the Deputy Defense Secretary, Steve Feinberg, to talk about contract diversity. That's the idea. Again, he doesn't explicitly ask. And by the way, SpaceX got that launch pad eventually, Pad 37 in Florida. But so much of, again, I can't get into Bezos's mind, but he has multiple companies. One of the scenes that was actually so striking to us in our reporting was Bezos, because there are multiple reasons why these guys are doing these things too. They felt very angry about DEI initiatives. Bezos in particular, I think I certainly did, and I can't speak for Jonathan, but until we were reporting this, I didn't realize how Bezos actually felt about the Washington Post as an investment. This is a storied newspaper that, helped bring down Richard Nixon, and Bezos is describing it to Trump over an intimate dinner during the transition as his worst financial investment
He said,
ever.
direct quote, Bezos to Trump, the people there are terrible. Talking about the Washington Post, talking about the business side of the Washington Post. They don't listen to me. And basically, we have this scene in the book where Trump and Bezos are essentially commiserating over the Washington Post.
How much they don't like it for maybe
different reasons, but that, I mean...
It's wild.
It's kind of amazing, really, to think about the Graham family, and now you have Bezos commiserating with the president-elect over the Washington Post.
We're going to talk a lot more about this.
Wow.
I've got to say also one of the things
picture
is
you paint.
you wonder how Elon Musk moved from being sort of voting for Democrats and Republicans, suggesting at times he was a Democrat. There are so many cell phones by the Democrats in Musk's case. They talk about how there was a conference for EVs.
Yeah.
And the Biden administration did not invite Elon Musk. And there's one example after another example after another example of how the Biden administration missed opportunities. I'm not saying that these people are saints. I'm not saying that they wouldn't have sucked up to Donald Trump in the end anyway. But a lot of decisions were made that pushed a lot of people in Silicon Valley that way.
I'm still stuck on the grotesque scene of the J6 choir music playing Hand on Hearts.
People who beat the shit out of cops on January the 6th being revered. Yeah, we'll see how history plays out one.
We're